Hi, I'm Brian Sergio, and this is the Big Love Spirituality Podcast. Spirituality, culture, and a theology of thriving. And this is episode 3, and the title is Ice, Truth, Evil, and the Energy of Rape. Yeah, I know, kind of heavy. When I shared with some friends that I was going to do a podcast called this, they said, "Wow, you really want to go there?" And I thought about it and prayed about it, and yes, I need to go here. So thank you for finding your way. Hope you find this meaningful. I'm going to try to say some things that maybe you haven't heard in response to the recent killing of Renee Nicole Good and the presence of ICE in Minneapolis and in Minnesota and throughout the country. So let me dive right in. Oh, before I do, if you find this podcast meaningful, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, and then also comment if you have something to say, and like it. That helps me get the word out about this podcast, and I really appreciate it. Okay, ICE, as you know, is the private force of President Trump and this administration that came into being specifically to try to rid this country of immigrants in our midst. Now, back in the fall of last year, when the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, was it the fall? Last year sometime, the Big Beautiful Bill was passed, it gave President Trump a almost, in my opinion, obscene degree of funding for the Border Patrol. When I saw that, I thought, he is going to have his own private militia. And why did that concern me so much? Because as our country has been moving deliberately toward a more authoritarian, if not dictatorial reality, I knew that would require, as all dictatorships do, a private military force. Look at history. Just about every dictatorship that's ever existed has had a military force that was completely at the disposal of the unilateral leader and who would do the bidding of that leader and who was accountable to no one other than that leader and willing to do incredibly brutal and cruel things in order to carry out the whims and the policies and the wishes of the leader. The Gestapo was the obvious expression of that in Nazi Germany. In Central America, in El Salvador, there were death squads. In the country of Haiti, which I'm very familiar with myself, having done work with grassroots organizations for over 30 years there, in their history of dictatorships under the Duvalier regimes, they had the Tonton Macoutes, private military forces of thugs, goons, who would show up in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day and take people from their homes or their jobs off the streets, broad daylight, and use force and do brutal things. Torture happened, killings happened, but they were accountable to no one and they were willing to do just about anything. And I'm afraid that that's what that so-called Big Beautiful Bill gave to President Trump. Now, I know we are not in that visceral and obvious of an expression of that, but we are stepping into it rapidly. And that's why many of us are sobered and horrified and some shocked by what we're seeing now. And the true tactics and intentions of this administration with regard to ridding this country of immigrants through the deployment of this unaccountable force is now very obvious, and we're seeing what they're willing to do. Now, this is a moment in our history that is very disturbing and that we need to take very seriously, as I know so many are. But I want to say some things about it that maybe you haven't heard. So, Jesus, my teacher, I will call him my savior, but my friend, Jesus said in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 32, "You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." That's how it's usually translated, where the truth will set you free. I looked up in the Greek. I think maybe the best translation is, "You will know the truth, and the truth will free you." It's incredibly important just to be a healthy human being, let alone someone on an authentic spiritual journey, let alone someone who just wants to make a positive contribution to the well-being of humanity and to the common good. It's incredibly important to embrace the truth, to tell the truth. Now, let me just say, I know how difficult it is to be a consistently, authentically truthful person. So I'm not going to be the least bit self-righteous about this. Just about everybody I know, myself included, have told lies at one point or another in our lives out of fear or various reasons. To be a healthy human being, though, to be free, is to be committed to a journey into truth, to hold ourselves accountable to being a truth teller and to embracing reality and what's real and what's really going on, and to take a look at ourselves. That's why Jesus always said, hey, before you worry about these specks in the eyes of other people, take a look at the log in your own eyes. Do your own inner work. Tell the truth to yourself about yourself. Be introspective. Be self-aware. That's a challenge for all of us, and I'm no exception to that. But truthful. It's incredibly important to be truthful. Truth-telling is the foundation of being free as an individual or as a society. What disturbed me, not as much as the killing itself, I mean, that is the absolute horror, but what disturbed me profoundly in the aftermath of what happened in Minneapolis to Renee Good was that the administration, President Trump, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, almost immediately got behind a camera, behind a microphone, and lied about what happened. Now, I'm sorry, but this isn't just my opinion. I saw the video. I saw the videos, including the ICE officer's video. There is no way that his life was endangered, or that that woman, Renee Good, or her wife, Rebecca, who was also in that video, neither one of them had any intention of harming any ICE personnel. They were simply there trying to stand in solidarity with immigrants who were about to be, or who were in the process of being apprehended, taken out of schools, out of their jobs, out of their families. And they were trying to get in the way, nonviolently, with love and, I would say, respect. The last words of Renee Good were, "Dude, I'm not mad at you." She said it with a smile on her face as she was slowly trying to get out of there. That force, ICE, has no legitimate right to order her or anyone out of their cars. She was not doing anything wrong, and they were not, quote, just doing their job. I've heard that from people that I love and know and respect. Hey, you got to let these guys just do your job. She shouldn't have been there. Now look, using violent and now lethal force, brutalizing people as masked agents, unidentified and unidentifiable, dressed in military fatigues, in unmarked cars, just pulling people over randomly and then taking people by force, apprehending them and disappearing them, that is not a legitimate police force by any means. And military professionals and law enforcement professionals are weighing in at great number now, saying exactly what I just said. That is not a legitimate form of policing. And I don't think anyone in this country should need to somehow comply with that kind of unidentifiable and unconstitutional, illegitimate expression of force for any reason. But it's the lying. It's the lying that is so dangerous beyond the policy itself. The administration is asking us, and this is gaslighting by definition, asking us not to believe what our own eyes have seen and what we know to be the truth. Now, just because something's on a video, I realize nowadays with AI and the capacity to create false videos and media of various kinds, I know it's hard to even just believe a video, but there were so many phone videos of people who were right there, and then eyewitnesses of people who saw what happened. I have absolutely no doubts. And I watched the ICE officer's video as well. He was not in danger. He was not dragged. These are lies. So, what's my point? Well, in that same chapter of the Gospel of John, chapter 8, in verse 44 specifically, but in verses around that as well, Jesus refers to the devil as the father of lies. The devil literally means the divider. Sometime I'll do a podcast episode on the devil and Satan, because I think evil is something that we need to take very seriously at this moment in our history. Jesus obviously believed in the reality of evil, in the prayer that he gave us that is prayed in one form or another in just about every church throughout the country. Every Sunday morning we say, "Deliver us from evil." Obviously, it is a reality. So what is evil? Well, in John 8:44, Jesus, as I said, referred to the devil as the father of lies. Evil is a source of falsehood, among other things. And after studying this deeply as a pastor, as a theologian myself, and I want to give some credit to M. Scott Peck and his excellent book, People of the Lie, and Richard Rohr, who wrote a book on evil called What Do We Do with Evil? I've come up with my own definition of evil that I want to share with you. Evil is the deliberate, willful, strategic suppression or distortion of truth for the purpose of selfish, egocentric personal gain, deliberately at the expense of others, with no regard for the consequence. I'll say that again because I know it's a mouthful. Evil is the deliberate, willful, strategic suppression or distortion of truth for the purpose of selfish, egocentric, personal gain, deliberately at the expense of others, with no regard for the consequences. Lying about the truth of what happened in Minneapolis is evil. Lying to ourselves that ICE are just legitimate police who have a job to do that we voted them to do, that is a lie. No one voted for them to use the tactics and the strategies that they are using now, at least not with awareness or consciously. The administration told us during the campaign that they were going to go after violent criminals, the worst of the worst, and people that had been convicted or who were here illegally. And many people said, okay, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm not even getting into my own opinion about that. But that's not what ICE is doing, and that's not what this administration is doing. They have quotas. President Trump wants to be able to say that he got rid of 1 million immigrants here. In other podcasts, I'm going to get into what is it about immigrants that so offends or bothers or scares people. We'll talk about that another time. Right now, I'm talking about the evil of ICE. So part of the evil is the lying involved right now. What do we do in the face of this? Well, as we pray, deliver us from it, we become the agents through which God delivers people, the well-being of the common good, from the presence and the practice of evil. How? By saying no, by refusing to comply with this, by getting in the way, as Renee Nicole Good did. By the way, if evil comes to my neighborhood, I will get in the way in the same way. That is, I'll get out there. If we're blowing whistles, if that's the strategy, okay. I'm in favor of organized nonviolent resistance, but I'll be out there saying no, saying we will not comply with this strategy, this policy, and these tactics. That's not who we are. And for me, as a follower of Jesus, as a spirit person, I am against any expression of public policy that is about dehumanizing and deliberately being cruel to anyone. And I will not dehumanize anyone that I'm opposing in terms of the strategy or the policy. It's not about that. In fact, I'm not going to dehumanize President Trump or any of the other individuals, the persons in this. It's the policy that, yes, they are making happen. I hold them responsible for the policy. And loving them does not mean having warm, fuzzy feelings toward them, or it may well mean getting in the way and preventing them from doing such damage and being so dangerous in their own delusion and disorder and illness when it comes to power. There is an illness regarding power. So-called Christianity is an illness or Christian nationalism is an illness regarding power. Christian nationalism is the idolatry, the worship of power. The Christ-centered spirituality of Jesus of Nazareth is about the power of love. So I will show up, we together will show up and say, no, we'll do it non-violently. The title of this episode, and this gets to the hardest hitting part now, is Ice, Truth, Evil, and the Energy of Rape. It was not lost on many people that the killing by the ICE officer in Minneapolis was a man killing a woman who refused to do what he said. A friend of mine said, a woman said, this is hitting me hard in a way I don't really even fully understand. And as we talked, she shared with me a quote by Margaret Atwood. And the quote is, "Men are afraid that women will laugh at them. Women are afraid that men will kill them." Part of what we witnessed was yet another expression of wounded masculine energy, male energy, insecure male energy, dominating and ultimately killing a woman. That is the energy of rape. Think about it. What is rape? But the willful dominating, taking from another person that which can only be freely given by consent. Anytime you dominate and force your will over against another person, against their will for your own self-centered purposes, that is the energy of rape. I'm not saying that there may not be a time when force is needed to overcome someone who is doing harm to other people. But Renee Good was not doing harm to anyone. Quite the contrary, she was trying to prevent harm from being done. And it hit me that that was an example of the energy of rape, this male over against dominating power. But that is just one expression of what this administration is doing all over the place. The taking of Venezuela, the threatening of Greenland, this assumption that we can take another country's sovereign land's resources simply because we want what they have or because we don't like who they are. That's not who we are as the United States of America at our best. You could argue that we've been doing that historically for a long time. That's another podcast also. When you look at it, you see that energy of rape all over the policies of this administration. And you can make the connections yourself between the fact that President Trump has been actually convicted of sexual assault crimes himself, not held accountable yet. And part of what we're all saying together now is it's time for accountability. It's time for a huge no to this energy of rape, and it's time for people who have violated women to be held accountable, who have violated the poor, those who are on the margins, those who don't have power, those who are living in fear, simply trying to have a life here, violating them, causing them to live in fear, trying to intimidate people into leaving this country. That's not who we are, and it's not who I want to be as a nation, and certainly not who I am or who I want to be as a spirit-centered person, let alone a Christian. So what do we do in the face of all this? As I said before, we organize. And we also get clear about who we are. And, for me, as a follower of Jesus, my bottom line, my foundation is that every human being is a child of God, created in the image of God, and therefore worthy of being treated with dignity and love and kindness and respect. Even if some immigrant has committed a crime and needs to be deported, even if that were the case, we do not need a policy of cruelty in order to carry that out. We do not need to be cruel in order to have safe borders. Policies of cruelty are antithetical to the truth that every human is created in God's image and deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And yes, that includes those that we dislike the most and disagree with the most. It's a matter of how we show up, in what spirit we show up. So that's the gist of what I have to say. I think we need to name some things at this point. The lying, the doubling down on false narratives is evil. We will meet evil with the goodness of nonviolent resistance and lovingly show up, peacefully show up, and get in the way of those who are trying to violate other people. We will say no. And finally, I need to say this. It's no accident that these last couple of weeks of doubling down on violent, rapacious policies and actions has effectively taken the Epstein files off of the headlines. I can't help but wonder if that was not part of the strategy, because the simple truth is that a couple of weeks ago, as the Epstein files were beginning to come out, and only about 1% has come out so far, it was doing damage rapidly to Donald Trump, to those who spent time at Epstein's Island. And I don't think it's an accident that catastrophic, cataclysmic, gross, controversial, news cycle dominating actions have been taken, one after another, to flood the zone and to take our attention off Epstein. And the irony and really poetic justice of all this is that they are not going to outrun Epstein. And it is going to be women who were victimized by powerful, rich, unaccountable, cruel men who thought they had the right to use power to play with the lives of vulnerable young women. It is these women, these victims, finding their voice and the rest of us finding our voice that is going to take them down. They know it. And that's why this is a very dangerous moment in history, and why I think the powers that be are willing to do just about anything to give us something else to focus on. Jesus said, when he sent his disciples out into the world, and that's all of us, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. Let's be wise enough to see and call out and name evil for what it is, and gentle enough to show up with love, a love that's so big that it would welcome the ICE officer, anyone who has done anything. It would welcome them back to the center of themselves, to find home within themselves and know that they are unconditionally loved by God. Yeah, they would need to repent, and they would need to be willing to be held accountable. Okay, I've said enough. Do me a favor and subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more of what I've got to say about this and other issues. I won't be talking just about political issues all the time. I'll be talking about all kinds of other spiritual teachings. Jewish Kabbalah and the Law of One are coming up soon. But subscribe, like, share this with somebody, and let's create some kind of interactive platform here that can serve the common good and be all about the big love. Okay, take care.